Hey there, Latrenda and Kevin. Thanks for joining us here on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. We are excited to dig into conversation with you two. You know, two NCTM presidents in the same room, Kyle. I don't know if we've ever done this before.
Yes. You might have to articulate, like, how is that possible? There are two presidents, but we'll let you elaborate on that in a moment. How are you and where are you coming to us from? Let's start with Kevin, a returning guest, and then we will flip over to Latrenda.
So I'm Kevin Dykema, currently the past president of NCTM. My term ended at the end of September. I'm coming to you today from Fort Worth, Texas. I don't live there. I just happen to be visiting and doing a speaking engagement at a conference there. Normally, I live in Southwest Michigan.
Awesome. Latrenda, how are you doing?
I am doing well today. I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm the current president, almost 2 weeks now, I think, of NCTM. And as I said, I'm coming from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we're having some unseasonably cool weather, at least in the mornings or the first couple of hours. So I'm excited.
Well, thank you both for spending some time here with us today. I know that, you know what, you look great considering we just came out of the NCTM, NCSM conference weeks. And I know how, very, very exhausting that can be, even for just attendees. I was helping on the NCSM side of things, and there was a lot of good chaos going on. So thank you for joining us on the show. Latrenda, you are new to the show, so we would love to start this conversation off with your math moment that you remember when you think of math class. Share with the audience what pops into your mind, and we'd love to dig in from there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for asking that question. And I listened to a couple other folks, and I listened to a couple of your previous broadcasts, just interested to see what other folks' math moments were. And I love all of my teachers, and I love my experience as a K-12 student. But when I think about my math moments as a student, they were not extremely memorable. Not in the most positive way. Now, did I enjoy math class? Most times I did. But I just don't remember math class being the way that we teach math now. But one of the things that I do remember that made a profound impact on me, I think, as a teacher, and probably it stirred some things around as a learner. And it wasn't until I became a teacher that it really became important. I do love math, but I also was a kid who loved to read. I read any and everything you put in front of me. And so when I was a child in school, you would have scholastic book orders, and so you could choose books to read. And so often I would just choose all the books I wanted, and my mother normally would rubber stamp them. But I remember one time she changed the book order, and she chose this problem-solving book. And it wasn't a book I chose. And so she was like, well, when we looked at the things, when they talked about things that should enrich you based on, your aptitude, they said we should buy things like this. So that's why I bought this book. And I remember being really upset with her because she made a choice that I didn't want. But when I got this book, it was math problem solving. And I loved this book. It was this little orange book, and I kept it forever. And I hated to admit to her that she made a choice that was something that I liked. And I think what made it such an impact on me is it was not the way math was taught to me in school. But I would find myself going back to this problem-solving book all the time to solve these little puzzles over and over and over again because I enjoyed it. So when I became a teacher, and I found out really how you could bring things like that into the classroom, I made a promise to myself that I would always have those types of things in my classroom for my students, because I just remember how it just changed how I saw math. Now, it didn't change anything in my classrooms at that time, but I knew that there was something different out there. And I think that was enough for me to just withstand everything else I had to go through.
Isn't that just the way it goes? Is that your parents like make a choice for you, and then you're like, oh, you were right.
They were
all
right.
along.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's I know. It's like same with their teachers, right? It's like the teachers like, I knew that you would like this, and then you resisted this whole time, and then you came along, and actually you're like, look back on it, you're like, okay, that was worthwhile.
Mhm.
That was worthwhile. Kevin, last time you were with us, your math moment I remember was about something common we've heard here from on the show, other people's math moments around the world, that multiplying game. And I think you had said like you were exceptional at it because you did a lot of memorizing, but then realized that wasn't, the best experience looking back on things. What would you say is a math moment now? Like think back to a recent math moment, something that's kind of sticking with you lately.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity a year or so ago to go and sit in a kindergarten classroom with a very veteran teacher. And she did a masterful job. She sat them all down. She asked some math question. I wish I could remember what it was. It was a pretty basic math question. And instantly, every single kid's hand went in the air. And I sat there and thought, oh, my eighth graders don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't ask a question and all their hands raised in the air. I'm happy if I can get 3 or 4 of them. And then she called on the first kid and talked about what they had for breakfast. Called on the second kid and talked about what happened on the bus. And I realized, oh, you really don't want to talk about math. You just want to talk, period. And that was such an eye-opening thing for me of, I think as secondary teachers, we don't always appreciate all the work our elementary colleagues do and getting them sort of, what does it mean to be school? What does it mean to answer a question?
Mhm.
And the teacher just was so purposeful about it and just constantly reminded them, remember when I asked you a question, you're supposed to be talking about that, not about whatever else you want to do. And I know as an 8th grade teacher, that was really eye-opening for me and just reminded me, God dang nabbit, those elementary teachers do so much work and just helping kids learn all those social life skills that we just take for granted later on. So it was a real eye-opening moment for me.
Oh, for sure. And, aside from that, what popped into my mind as you were describing it is just this innate want to communicate as well. Like when you really think about it, and, I think back to my math moments and I think back to, even how a lot of, math classes are taught. And I think, and this is going to be a nice segue into your most recent book, is the idea that as students grow and as the math becomes more complex, it seems like the classrooms get more quiet. And then, Kevin, you've mentioned, hey, trying to get students to participate becomes less, we'll say not as easy as it was in that kindergarten classroom, despite what it was the students wanted to be talking about. And that brings us to, and actually, Latrenda as well, your math moment I wanted to mention as well. It's almost like that book gave you a light into what math could be compared to maybe what you knew it as a student. And I think these math moments are a really great segue into the Reimagining High School Mathematics book. I would love to go and we'll start with Latrenda. Why high school mathematics? Why this book? Why now? I think I have some ideas as to why, but I want to hear it from you both. So Latrenda, tell us a little bit about the book and why is now the time to be addressing some of these key issues in high school?
Thank you. Well, unfortunate as it is, we know you just mentioned, Kyle, how it's very different, and Kevin did as well, when we see the level of engagement, the level of participation, when we move from K5 or really probably K5 to 612. And sometimes, maybe there are a couple, middle school classrooms that are similar to that K5 experience. And so we wonder, what's happening? Well, unfortunately, for quite a long time, high school has not been what it needed to be for a lot of students, and not just students who someone would say, oh, for the struggling students. For a lot of students, it was not the experience that it needed to be. They didn't see the relevance in the mathematics they were learning in class. They definitely were not engaged in what they were learning. They weren't making connections. And most importantly, when they left our safety of that K-12 environment, they weren't seeing a connection to things that they were going to actually pursue in their future careers. So we have to reimagine that space for students and think about what are those components that we need to have in place. One, to have them see the relevance. How does this connect to something that happens in the real world? So that means changing the script and having different things in those classrooms. So having a more inclusive view of what mathematics is. It shouldn't be just a narrow view. It's just this trajectory. And if you don't fit on this train, this is not for you. Math is for everyone. There's not a single person in this world who does any job who does not use math on a daily basis. So they need to see that it's relevant. And so we want to make sure that we reimagine that space, but we put some structures in place so that students can see that coherence, and we can help our teachers to build in that coherence, that connectedness, and have those common themes interwoven throughout their entire high school career.
Yeah. I think it's such an important time to do this, and to make these shifts. And it's like we should have been doing this before, but you're right. Like we this is why we need this now. Like we need to think about high school mathematics. And Kevin, like in your NCTM's president's address at the annual conference this year, you said something that really stuck with me that I think actually is really important for teachers and leaders to hear. And you said, like, Principles to Action has been around 10 years. Like, it's the 10-year anniversary. And it's like your book, I think when people get new resources, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's more to do. Like, what else do I have to put on my plate, or what else do I have to now consider in my roles? But you had said something really profound. It's like, there's nothing new going on here that Principles to Action essentially doesn't say we should do. It's like, those are still the 8 effective teaching practices. Do you want to speak a little bit more to how that and how it relates to the book?
Yeah, I think when we think about the book and the writing team that put the High School Mathematics Reimagined together, it was built on all of the work that we've been doing as a math education field. And I think, John, as you know, so often we get a new resource and people say, oh, time to move away from the old stuff, focus in on this. We need to keep going. We know those 8 effective teaching practices are still the 8 effective teaching practices, and we need to keep going with that. With catalyzing change, there's the 4 questions that we should all be considering and the 4 key recommendations. Those 4 key recommendations aren't going anywhere. We look at this new resource as it's building on all of the prior work, and it's that next step. It's recognizing that we need to continually look at what can we do to better meet the needs of every single student. What can we do so that students leave our K-12 space, our high school space in this case, recognizing that mathematics is useful. Mathematics is not just a series of procedures to memorize and then memorize a new set of procedures. As Latrenda said, we want our students to see those connections between those different things. So we're trying to continually get that message. We're not saying scrap everything you have been doing. It's time to refocus. It's time to consider those 8 effective teaching practices. What can we do to revitalize our instruction to use those 8 practices? What can we continue to think about in terms of those 4 essential key recommendations from the catalyzing change? And we look at this is building. This is the next step. Let's keep going with the work, and let's not let off that gas pedal.
I love it. And, Principles to Action has had a massive impact on not only how I saw mathematics in my own classroom, but it was really imperative in my work as a district leader. And I guess the sad reality is the fact that it has been 10 years, and these are big ideas. These are big shifts. And I love that you're reiterating the fact that this is building on those ideas. These are not new ideas, and it's about going deeper. So I wonder, and I'd like to frame this for both of you, but we'll start with Latrenda. What would you say in this book was the biggest, sort of value add for the community, for that mathematics education community, to help grow and help to work towards doing some of these things that we know we should be doing from principles to actions, but we might not be seeing, the traction yet in the secondary classroom as we would like to see it?
I'm going to say there are 2 things. And from someone who spent the bulk of my teaching career working with elementary teachers and with students, and then the last 10 years working with aspects K-12, one of the things that I like about High School Reimagined, Revitalized, and Relevant is we introduce our teachers, our educators, to 5 cross-cutting concepts. So we're taking these 5 themes, these 5 ideas, and we're actually talking about how these can show, you can utilize them across all the courses in high school. I remember when I was in school, it's like there were these courses for these kids, these courses for these kids. And there were some things that some students never got to experience because someone thought that this was not for them. And so what you find is in those 5 cross-cutting concepts, it doesn't take away the fact that you're using those research informed effective teaching practices from principles to actions. But now I'm looking at, these are some habits of mine. And so when I'm in the algebra classroom, this is something that happens with this cross-cutting concept. When I move to geometry, I'm still exploring that same cross-cutting concept, but I'm connecting it to that content. Same thing with data science and data literacy. So now I feel as if some of that coherence that maybe people didn't feel among the high school courses, they have an opportunity to see that, because now it doesn't matter what pathway a student chooses, they are going to experience those 5 cross-cutting concepts. So they're making connections from year to year, and they're seeing connections between those courses and how this relates. And I think taking also those mathematical modeling and statistical processes and actually amping those up a bit. You see some familiar things in there from the 8 mathematical practices that most people have adopted in whatever iteration of the standards they're using. But you see 4 common themes there, and then those practices are grouped there. So now we're really looking at, where's the real world aspect? How are we making connections? How is it relevant? Because now they're in tasks that make sense to them. It's relevant. It's connected to things that happen. So I think this is a value add that we've added that language to the vernacular that is principles to actions, the vernacular that is the 4 recommendations from catalyzing change, and just giving high school those coherence pieces that I don't think we've seen in those courses just for a long time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those 5 are huge, especially if huge to bring them together, right? And also give like ammo. It's like you're giving ammo for all those teachers who are still seeing that, like when kids ask the common question, like, why are we learning this? Like, it gives them more ammo in their buckets. I don't know if that's a thing. Buckets and ammo. I don't know.
I don't know where you
But I mean,
store
like,
it.
I
mean,
sometimes I
it's up to you.
just say phrases that don't make sense. But it's like you're giving those teachers, like, there's commonality here, but also when you say, like, why are we doing this? You're like, because we're talking about functional and structural thinking. Like, that is an important component of what we're doing across all of our courses here in high school. And this is an important idea about why we make decisions and how do we make decisions. So I completely agree that these 5 like add a huge value into structure for our educators. Kevin, I'm going to toss it to you, and I want you to think about the leadership side of things for a moment. Like, think about how are we? So we've got these 5, say, cross-cutting strategies, these concepts. How do you see this? How do you see this rolling out for practicing classroom teachers who rarely get their hands on a book like this? And you've got teacher, leaders who are leading the charge. Like Kyle said, like, it was so important to have principles to action for him to help him structure what was rolling out in his district. How do you see this kind of rolling out for schools across North America?
Yeah. And I recognize, different schools have different structures. And, when you're working with a district that may have one high school, the way it rolls out may be a little different than a district that has 25 high schools. So there's going to be a lot of differences. But I really see it, the whoever's in charge of mathematics, whether it's a K-12 director, a 9-12 director, an assistant superintendent of whatever, they need to make themselves familiar with the book and then start working with educators. Say, all right, hey, we have these new 5 cross-cutting concepts. Those who are teaching 9th graders, where are you seeing these 5 cross-cutting concepts? Those who are teaching grade 10, where are you seeing these 5 cross-cutting concepts? And start to break them into bite-sized chunks and have the educators start to look for some of those connections. I know when I got the first draft of these 5 cross-cutting concepts, that was eye-opening for me. And I thought, oh, I had never recognized that some of the stuff that I've always taught in 8th grade is really connected to this and really connected to this. So we talk about it in terms of the students, but I think it's going to be just as eye-opening for many educators that we're going to start to see some of the coherence within mathematics. We're going to see how some of those things are really developed. So I think a first step is, get working with the teachers. NCTM has provided some resources to assist with that. nctm.org/HS Reimagined. We have some blank templates. We have some filled in templates. So there's some of the stuff there, recognizing that math leaders are very, very busy. But I think it's time to not just keep talking about what we need to do, but start getting to work. Start putting groups of teachers together and look at those 5 cross-cutting concepts and how they're developed. Take a look at those 11 mathematical and structural processes that Latrenda talked about, arranged in the 4 different clusters. Start talking about where are we seeing those in our classrooms? Where should we be seeing those in our classrooms? Where can we really increase the amount of mathematical and statistical modeling? And as leaders, I think we need to provide examples for our teachers. So often I know I sit in a professional development session, get all excited, and then I go back to my classroom and think, how in the world does this look for me? And I think as leaders, when we start to provide a couple of concrete examples of this is what we mean when we say do this, it helps the teacher and they can say, oh, all right, let's put it into action. So there's lots of ways, and I'm excited to see the impact that this document's going to have on the student experiences, and just to see where math education goes in the next 3, 5, 10 years.
100%. And, we will be putting links to the book inside. And actually, Latrenda, it sounds like you're excited to kind of build on that. So go ahead, please do.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to say, when we're talking about high school and we're talking about just why this book is different, when you think about the elementary classroom, you teach a little within multiple domains. So there's some algebraic reasoning. You're teaching geometry. You're teaching data. You're teaching, those basic things with place value. So we do a snippet of multiple domains. And what I found when I switched to work at a district level, like sometimes teachers, for no fault of their own, because they only teach one course, so I'm only focusing on algebra, they either forget or they don't know how that connects to something that happened in another domain or another course. So a lot of times our teachers, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they have been in one place and we don't have structures in place a lot of times for them to talk across domains. Like, how many times do the algebra teachers talk to the geometry teachers and talk about how do you build on this or make connections? So I'm hoping that those type of discussions are going to take place on the high school campus, because I don't think teachers are working hard. They're doing the best with what they have. But if you don't know that these two things are connected, you won't see it. But now we're making it really explicit for them because we're helping them think about it moves from here to there, but this is how it looks in this course. This is how it looks in that course. And I think that was something I experienced with working with all teachers in the last couple of years, that for no fault of their own, they just don't know of it because they're in that bubble.
I love it. And, so I'm thinking about this. We will be putting the link to the book in the show notes. So people should definitely be checking that out and taking a peek. But I'm wondering from both of you, and I'll start with Kevin here too, before we sign off, I want you to imagine that, we have a lot of leaders. I'd like to say, whether they're in the classroom or not, folks who are listening to a math podcast about math education are leaders, right? Be it in the classroom, department chairs, principals, coordinators, it goes all the way up. My question is, they put the book down. What would be your, advice is such a heavy word. I don't want it to be advice, but your recommendation, your perspective for them now that they've gone through this book. What are you hoping? What sort of, send off do you have for them now that they've had an opportunity to explore some of the great ideas that are shared in the book?
Yeah. Now it's time to take action. We can't just keep talking about what needs to change. We need to start making change. And we don't need to do everything all at once. Don't think you need to throw everything out and start from scratch. And you may make that decision, but start with doing something. Look at one of the big, broad ideas. There were the 3 R's. Focus on one of those R's for a year, and either focusing on the reimagining, the revitalizing, or the making math relevant. The second year, pick up a second R. The third year, pick up a third R. I'd much rather have that than somebody who reads it and says, oh, that's too much work. I can't do anything.
Right.
Pick a spot, do it well, and it's time.
True.
Our students deserve a different experience. Our students need to be leaving high school recognizing that math is a beautiful subject and that math has real life implications for them and that they're capable of doing mathematics.
I like that advice. Like, how many books do we read where we like, yeah, I read 20 books this year, but then how many books did you actually put into action? Like, how much action did you take here? Because you can read it all day long and share that information, but if you're not putting into action, then did you really read it, and did it really matter to you, and was it impactful to you? I appreciate that those words of wisdom, Kevin. Latrenda, if there was again one say big takeaway from the book that what Kyle said, they put it down. We're now we're doing something, and what would you say is the big message, the big takeaway you'd want someone to have after reading the book?
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Kevin. Is definitely to take action. And so what I would suggest, in addition to thinking about, okay, where am I going to start realistically, if I'm going to start with 1 R, then move to the next, but also if I'm the leader and maybe I'm not a math teacher, I guess from experience, or maybe have been out of the math classroom for a long time, I would say, learn together with like your math faculty. So engage in this like we're going to take this together. So we're all going to look at this. We're going to talk about it. And then we're going to go back and take a reflection of where we are currently. Because I think when people start talking, like it may look one way holistically, but when they start listening to each other, they're going to find that some people are further along in this process than others. And I would definitely say take advantage of some of the things that are incorporated within the text itself, like some of those reflective pieces, the pause and reflect. Like actually don't just look at, oh, those are good questions. Really take time. Sometimes 10 minutes is the most it will need for a PLC meeting. You know what? This is what we want to address, and we're going to look at this. So now that we've looked at this, and then there's some places where it says you look at it based on if you're the teacher, if you're the district leader, the state leader, or the coach, everyone looks at his or her piece. And then now we're going to put something in action based on that, because, we don't want anyone to be overwhelmed by the process. And I think it's so built on things that people are familiar with already that it won't be overwhelming for anyone, because there's a lot of familiarity. You're just adding a couple pieces to tie it all together. But I would definitely say get in the weeds, sit with your staff, and everybody take a piece, commit to it, and then come back and reflect on those pieces, because this can be done as a site-based reflective piece to transform what happens. You don't have to wait for someone to make a law in your state or your province to change anything. You can do this within your classroom, within your school, within, if you're working with the district, working with folks, but you can begin to make those changes. Our kids deserve it. They deserve to have those experiences for sure.
I love it. And like you say, if you wait, you're going to be waiting a long time, right? It's like make that change. And the common theme I hear, although you've articulated it differently, both of you, is that we need to start and do something, make it small enough, and then build from there. And that will compound, right? My favorite lesson, compound interest, so it's let this compound, let it snowball. And, there's a lot of great messages there, because again, as educators, not just in a math classroom context, content context, or how we deliver. There's a lot of weight on our shoulders and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So let's make sure that we're not adding it all on. Let's take something. Let's bite, take that small bite and work towards it. My friends, it has been an honor, a pleasure to have you both here with us on the show. Where can the Math Moment Maker community find out more about you both? I know the NCTM website, but Kevin, where can friends connect with you? And then we'll have Latrenda share as well.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, X, whichever you want to call it. You can find me on Instagram. You can go to the NCTM website and find the good old snail mail, and happy to connect that way. And always looking for additional ways that we can help support math educators throughout the world and really improving mathematics education for every single student. So appreciative of our time together today.
Awesome. Latrenda, where can we, find out more about you and the work you're doing?
Okay. Well, thank you again for my first appearance here. I love it. You guys are great. You're wonderful. And so you can find me on, I still say Twitter, but it's X. And so you can find me there. It's easy because it's my first name. And you can also find me on Instagram as well. I think my first name is incorporated in there as well. My mom gave me this name,
Nice.
So I decided I'll just capitalize on it.
Right.
So I'll use it with
It works.
And of course, it's easy to find us on the NCTM website. I answer email no matter what time they show up.
Perfect.
I stay up very late. So I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I've noticed one member sending me emails at midnight or whatever. I've got to stop answering. But
well, thank you both. Thank you both for the great work that you're doing. You're bringing so much to the math community. It was many moons ago when I first attended NCTM, and it had a major impact, and it's something that continues to influence the work we're doing. And we always love sharing the work from NCTM, NCSM, and the great organizations that they both are. So thank you, my friends. Enjoy your time, Kevin and Latrenda. Hey, hopefully it warms up for you.
or cools down.